Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're back with another Road to Macstock show. We are talking to the presenters, we're talking to volunteers, we're talking to pretty much anyone that has anything to do with Macstock to give you an idea of what you're going to be experiencing in July in Woodstock, Illinois, if you show up, and we certainly hope you show up. This time we have Dr. Robert Carter. He's going to talk about what his session is and what you'll be learning from him, and we'll get to that right after this. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Jamf and their Jamf Now software that helps you manage your Apple devices from anywhere. Get started by setting up your first 3 devices free at jamf.com/MacVoices. Robert, welcome back to MacVoices. You're becoming kind of a regular fixture around here.
Oh, well, thank you, Chuck. It's a pleasure to get the chance to be on again. I always enjoy these shows, so looking forward to this one.
I am too, and this time it's just you and me. We left all the others out, so that makes it doubly good, I think.
That's right. Sounds good.
So what is your session going to be at Macstock this year?
Well, I'm actually going to be talking again about Apple accessibility, particularly for accessibility for those of us who are blind. And I'm going to be focusing this year on Braille accessibility. However, if you don't mind, I'd like to give just a little bit of general Apple accessibility background to lead us up to this topic, if that's all right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll try to make this really brief because I covered this accessibility in general in some detail last summer at Macstock. But around 2005 or so, shortly after Apple had switched over to Intel from the PowerPC chip, I guess this was around OS 10.4 Tiger, they announced that they were going to make the Mac accessible for people who can't use the visual interface. So they created their own screen reading technology called VoiceOver. And VoiceOver's primary role is to speak information that is on the screen of the Mac and iOS devices and even Apple Watch and Apple TV. And so it speaks the names of the icons as the focus is on them, and you can use the keyboard, at least in the case of the Mac, to interact with what's on the screen and do an amazing amount of things if you can't even see the screen. I'm talking about everything from word processing to browsing the web to email to social media to coding if you choose to do that. It's amazing just how broad Apple accessibility is actually with VoiceOver. But a lot of people don't realize that in addition to the accessibility through speech or through a verbal interface, a text-to-speech interface, Apple also designed VoiceOver to be capable of displaying information that is on the Mac or an iOS device in what we call electronic Braille. It's sometimes called refreshable Braille. And this involves taking an external device, a piece of hardware, and hooking it up to your Mac through USB or Bluetooth or to an iOS device via Bluetooth. And once you do that, then you can have VoiceOver, instead of speaking the information, you can have it display on a single line of Braille on an electronic display. And I'll just show you this display, and maybe you can at least see what the device looks like.
So for those of you who are just listening to this and not watching the video version, Robert has a device that looks like it has, Robert, I keep calling them pins that extend and retract to form the different Braille characters. And then there are some other larger control buttons on the surface as well.
Yes, there are different types of Braille devices, but this particular one has its own keyboard and, as you said, its own display with these pins that completely retract when you change lines, and then the pins pop up in a different configuration. I'll be explaining a bit more at Macstock about how Braille works. It's a 6-dot cell of dots, three vertical dots on either side of the cell, and that actually ends up making up all of the Braille, the alphabet, the numbers, the punctuation signs. So then you have to have these pins change their configuration to display the correct patterns on each line of Braille. So you only see one line of Braille at a time on this display, and then you press a button on the display to have it display the next line. And you wouldn't think that one line at a time would be changes lines instantaneously. These displays are very, very fast. The problem with the displays is they use a technology called piezoelectric technology to make these pins raise and lower as needed. And this particular technology is about 40 or so years old, Chuck. It has not changed in 40 years. It's one of the few pieces of modern technology that up until very recently had not really changed at all. And I'll talk maybe a bit if we have time about what's possibly coming with Braille. But the problem with that is that these Braille displays are extremely expensive to build, and the demand for them is very low. So the company that builds them has to somehow make enough money to stay in business. And these things have to be very carefully constructed. They say by hand. I don't know exactly what the manufacturing process is today, but the point is each of these pins has to work perfectly, because if a pin is raised when it should be lowered, then you're displaying the wrong information on the display. So there's no, if the display begins to malfunction, then it has to be returned for repair. And so unfortunately, we've got a huge catch-22 with Braille. It's great that Apple allows us to use Braille in this way, because it's particularly fabulous with an iOS device, because I can sit in a meeting with my colleagues, have my phone in my pocket, but have it displaying the same information, the same document that my colleagues are working with on my Braille display. So I can work right along with them completely silently. The display has its own keyboard, so I can even edit a document that way, or I can, of course I wouldn't do this, and neither would you, but I could theoretically sit in that meeting and check my email or get on Twitter, because I'm only accessing apps that are on my phone, and it's displaying the information right on the display, just like it would be speaking the information if I were using the voice version of VoiceOver. So it's a really great way to interface with the Mac or an iOS device when you need that kind of privacy, perhaps, or you need the ability to be able to multitask and work with something while maybe you're communicating with other people, or you just need to be silent in a meeting. You don't want to wear headphones, so you're blocking your colleagues out, or you don't want the noise of VoiceOver speaking out during a meeting or that kind of thing. So point is, Braille has been invaluable to me as a way of connecting to the Mac and to iOS, but I don't think a lot of people even know that that's possible. So that's the reason that I wanted to kind of do a part two, if you will, or a follow-up on Apple accessibility, because I'd like people to at least know that this technology exists. Now, I did say there's a catch-22 here, and it is one is the cost. These Braille display devices, most of them cost between $4,000 and $10,000 up, depending on how many characters the display has on its line. It actually costs about $75 a character if you have to have one of these cells, we call them Braille cells, replaced on these displays. So the people who need the displays to perhaps gain employment or get education, for the most part, can't afford them. And so there's been this huge problem with how do people get the technology who really need it. And the other piece of it that's so ironic is that the schools, the public schools, aren't teaching a lot of the blind students Braille anymore, because both a lot of students and teachers feel that Braille is kind of obsolete. It sort of had its day, but when everyone had a talking iPhone or a talking computer, they felt like, well, they don't really need Braille anymore. But the problem with that is if you don't have Braille, it's much harder to see how things are spelled, how they're punctuated, how sentence structure is laid out. And I was an English major as an undergraduate, and I would have been lost, I think, without really being able to have some access to Braille sentence structure and stuff like that. But it's not being taught as much. Some of us are working to try to bring it back, because one of the ironies of it is when the iBook store, the books in the iBook store and the books in the Amazon Kindle store became accessible a few years ago to VoiceOver, we immediately had literally millions of Braille books available to us through this electronic Braille that would never, ever have made it into print. They say about 1% of what gets printed each year actually ends up in hard copy Braille. So it's on the one hand seen a huge renaissance with this electronic capabilities and availability, but it's on the other hand struggled to not breathe its last breath because a lot of people don't see it as being that viable anymore. So it's a really interesting conundrum with Braille, honestly.
Jamf and their Jamf Now software are this week's sponsors of Mac Voices. Jamf Now gives you the capability of remotely managing your devices, Macs, iPhones, and iPads. Even better, Jamf Now makes the process simple. No IT expertise needed, so you can focus on your business, not your tech. Setting up your devices with Jamf Now is actually fun. You start with a blueprint that you customize for your devices, the apps and settings that you want to deploy to them. Set up multiple blueprints for multiple devices or users with different needs. For example, the sales team probably needs one set of resources, the service team needs another, and the management team has other needs altogether. Need to get devices already in the field on board? User enrollment makes it easy for them to use the blueprints you've just created to get up to speed and in concert with the rest of the team. Email is the lifeblood of many parts of your organization. Jamf Now lets you automatically configure company email accounts on all your Apple devices. It doesn't matter whether you are using Microsoft Exchange, Google Mail, Yahoo Mail, or your own IMAP or POP accounts. Jamf Now has you covered. Wi-Fi is super convenient, but super dangerous too if you're dealing in confidential information, and these days, who isn't? With Jamf Now, you can set up your devices to automatically join your secure networks. It doesn't matter if you're running WEP, WPA, or WPA2. No more remembering all those annoying, long, secure passwords. Jamf Now does it for you. That's where Jamf Now starts, but there's a whole lot more. Asset tags, app distribution, inventory export so your data isn't trapped on your devices, accessibility and recovery, the list goes on and on. But don't be fooled by all those features. Jamf Now is simple enough for a small business or even for a family to use, but powerful enough for a Fortune 500 company. I want you to find out just how easy it is by visiting jamf.com/MacVoices right now, sign up, and set up your first 3 devices free, regardless of whether they're Macs, iPhones, or iPads. Once you find out just how powerful and useful Jamf Now is, for just a couple dollars per device each month, you can manage your entire fleet of devices, no matter how large that fleet is. Visit jamf.com/MacVoices now and find out just how easy and even fun device management can be. That's jamf.com/MacVoices, jamf.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Jamf for their support of this week's Mac Voices. Robert, every time we talk, I learn so many things from you, things that I never thought about as being a challenge for someone who is blind. For example, I never thought of the concept of typos in Braille. but that's exactly what you have if the pins start malfunctioning.
Right, exactly.
I never thought of it exactly until right now. Just that those machines, I mean, each cell has all those moving parts, and then the whole unit has an incredible number of moving parts that have to be maintained and kept up.
Right.
The idea about sentence structure, and because I think many of us would, and now I understand perhaps wrongly, would assume that listening is much better than trying to deal with Braille. But I completely see your point in. You don't hear the periods, you don't hear the commas,
Right.
depending on who. But I assume that those are part of the Braille alphabet.
Of course.
Yeah.
You can force VoiceOver to speak periods and commas and to spell things, but it means kind of stopping and redoing the line or the sentence over again. But with Braille, it's all laid out right there under your fingertips, just as it is laid out on the screen for someone looking at it visually. And so it is really important. In fact, we find that most of the people who are blind who are employed today have at least some knowledge and make some use of Braille. So there's a correlation there between employment and Braille. But again, unfortunately, the employment rate ever since I have been alive, which is 61 years now, has hovered around between 60 and 70% unemployment. So it's a huge problem, and there are a lot of reasons for it, and that's way beyond the depth and breadth of this conversation and of this presentation. But I really am honored that Mike Potter has given me the chance to give Braille a few minutes at Macstock, because it's something that very few people know anything about. And it's to Apple's credit that they have delved into the needs of someone who's blind far enough to understand the importance of making Braille a part of the VoiceOver interface if you choose that.
Robert, last year when you gave your talk, I was absolutely fascinated. Because I think many of us, again, don't perceive that we have a need to know this, when in fact, it's something any of us could face at any time in our lives. Our loved ones could face some of these challenges at any point. It is something very much, I think, very beneficial that we all know a little bit about this. We may not need to be an expert on it. You've obviously, for obvious reasons, also had a lot more experience than most of us. But I think it's wonderful that you're taking the time and putting the effort in to come to Macstock and educate us all a little bit about this.
Well, I think part of my motivation for doing it, honestly, Chuck, is wanting to be a part of the Apple community. And, Apple has really, I think, tried to give the message that we try to design and build our products for everyone. They didn't say we're going to build some specialized products for blind people or deaf people or short people or tall people. They said we're gonna build them for everyone, and that kind of inspired me to say, yes, I am someone who is blind, and that's a fact, and that's part of who I am. But even more of that, I'm someone who enjoys my Apple products just like everyone else in the world does, and I would like to work toward participating in a community, not just as Robert the blind guy, but as Robert, who enjoys his products but uses them in this way because he happens to be blind. And to me, I think that's the direction we have to move in this world if we're going to ever really unite and not leave people out and bring people together in a way that I would dream of us all being able to interact someday. So I don't mean to get off of my soapbox, but I just wanted to make that point.
No, I think, and your point is so well taken, and it's something that okay, now it's my turn to do a little soapbox thing. But as Apple users, we all, I think, recognize that people use their technologies in different ways. It can be because we're doing different things with the technology. It can be just our experience level. something as simple as the programs we opt to use for whatever task we're trying to accomplish. So the way you're looking at it to me is just one more reflection of that approach to technology, that you have a particular thing that you need to accomplish, and this is how you're doing it. And maybe there are ways that you'd like to be able to do it better.
Yeah, and Apple deserves a huge credibility for what they have done with accessibility. You know, they built it right into the operating system, right into OS X, so that any Mac in the world that you walk up to, and if you press Command F5, it will start up VoiceOver. Or if you go to the store and buy a new Mac and you bring it home and you plug it in and you let it power up, but you don't touch the pointing device or the keyboard for a couple minutes, it will automatically load up VoiceOver and say, hey, would you like me to verbally walk you through the setup of this Mac? And that is, to me, true accessibility. And that had never been done before until Apple did that in, you know, the early 2000s. Because before, accessibility had always been something that you had to buy extra. And many times you'd pay more for the screen reading technology than you would pay for the PC itself. And Apple just came and turned all that on its head. And Microsoft is still trying to catch up with Windows 10 and accessibility. They're working on it. They're getting there. They're making progress. But Apple has had a real leadership role in this area for the past 12 or so years now. It's really quite extraordinary, honestly.
I know your podcasting partner, Allison Hartley, and I talked about some of this recently too. But the idea that Apple has implemented so many of these things in iOS, I think Allison's point was that who would have ever thought that a blind person would be holding a sheet of glass as a preferred device?
Yeah, I was one of those. He said, well, when it first came out, I said, well, it's too bad that it will never be accessible. And I'm so glad I was wrong.
Yeah. So you're right. Apple has done some amazing things for everyone, regardless of what their challenges are. So
they have the engineering talent to give us all, you know, a really delightful experience. I've recently had that delight with the AirPods, just because Apple created something that was really cool and solved a lot of problems with charging wireless headphones and Bluetooth connectivity. But they devoted that same level of detail and that same talent to accessibility. And that just goes beyond cool in my book. Of course, it scratched an itch that I have, but it also scratches an itch in some ways that we all have, which is just this idea of universal design. And why not make devices so that we can all use them? Because in some ways it makes it better for all of us, honestly.
Do you have a pair of AirPods?
I do.
Okay, so give us a quick review, and this is your fault for bringing it up. How do you like them?
I love them. I'm one of the lucky people in that they fit well in my ears, so they're very comfortable to wear. I'm really satisfied with the sound of them. I've had very few connectivity problems with them. They automatically charge when they go into their little charging case, and so they're always charged up and ready to go. I have to charge the case 2 or 3 times a week just by plugging a lightning cable into it. But I couldn't be happier with the AirPods. There are still some small connectivity issues to work out if you use VoiceOver on several different devices. Sometimes I'll be using my Apple Watch with my AirPods in, and the AirPods will think that I'm wanting the VoiceOver to come through the watch when I'd really rather it stay with the phone. A few things like that, but that's unique to VoiceOver, and those kinds of issues will be resolved over time, no question. I love the AirPods and the Apple Watch combination because, as you know, the AirPods don't have any way other than Siri of modifying volume or of skipping tracks or that kind of thing, but you can easily do those things with the Apple Watch. So I really love them. Have you tried them?
No, I have not, and you're not helping because everybody I've talked to says, "Oh, you got to try them. They're great. They're great." So you guys are all going to cost me money.
Yeah, probably. Maybe not real soon though, because they're so hard to get.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's exactly why I haven't tried them yet. But but I'm fast becoming convinced that I really need to. So we're talking about Macstock in July in Woodstock. You'll be there, and you'll be talking more about Braille and educating us a lot about the technology behind Braille and the importance behind Braille. I'm looking forward to learning more than just a little session we could do here, because there's so much. And again, I sincerely mean it. Your session last year was terrific. I learned so much. So.
Well, thank you, Chuck. And I so much appreciate the support that you've given to me personally, and also in the name of accessibility. You've really opened up MacVoices to me and to this topic, and it's very much appreciated.
Well, you're always welcome, because it's always a terrific discussion that I learn. If I learn something from it, I'm sure a lot of other people learn from it. So we will see you, I guess, in Woodstock in July, if not, and I'm sure you'll be back here before then, but I'll see you in person there.
That's the plan. Looking forward to it. It's kind of nice in July in Chicago. I would encourage anyone who can to come out and be with us up there.
No question about it. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is the Road to Macstock on MacVoices. Really, please, Macstock2017.com. You're going to have a ball. You're going to learn so much. You're going to learn stuff about stuff that you didn't think you needed to know anything about, and then you're going to go home and tell all your friends about it and why it's important. We will see you there. Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.